but it's always the ratio between them to work perfectly, right? Maybe the balance is off. So maybe you need to figure out what needs to be the exact ratio between progesterone and estrogen for her that works the best. And then are these interfering now with, for example, melatonin? Have you played around with melatonin? Melatonin is super strong. Estrogen and melatonin are always a bit in a battle, and the cortisol, the melatonin, the estrogen, all of these influence each other. Melatonin can be super, super protective of migraine. And if she's already got a deficiency in a couple of other hormones, maybe she's not making enough melatonin, which could give a protection of the oxidative stress created if they're out of balance, potentially. But hormonal migraine is literally one of the trickiest to fix.
Dr. Elena, I'm so happy to have you on. As I said in the intro, we have not yet talked about migraines on the podcast. So, but yet I know so many people suffer from. I used to, and my friend slash assistant really suffers bad. So I have a ton of questions for you, but basically for her, so that she can get some answers as well to her migraine problem. So welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Dr. Amie, such a pleasure. And I must say also, even though I do a lot on the metabolism and migraine interaction, thyroid is such a huge player in metabolism and also hence in migraine. And yet I never really looked into it as much or talked about it so much. So this is different. I love it. So I'm very happy to be here today.
Well, I always talk about metabolism as well as it relates to fat loss, because many of my listeners are struggling in that area because their thyroid is low or they don't have proper balance of their hormones. And yeah, I mean, metabolism comes into play big time, but I'm very intrigued about the connection between metabolism and migraine, because that's something I haven't heard yet. So before we dive into that, I want to hear your story, because my understanding is you suffered chronic migraines for many, many years. And like most of us in this space, it sounds like a pain to purpose story. Like your suffering led you to become an expert. So what brought you into this space?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So it is actually a pain turned passion story, because when I was around 14, I started to have these excruciating headaches, one-sided, light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, smells were off. And I could go to bed and I would wake up from pain, right? I couldn't just sleep through it like you would do with normal headache. And my parents were like, oh, she's a teenager now, you know, she's being difficult, and not taking it very seriously at the beginning. But then it was really, really bad. So I went from specialist to specialist. And eventually we asked Dr. Google one-sided headaches, and it told us it's probably migraine. And that was then a year later also supported by a specialist clinic. But yeah, from then on, I learned more about migraine. I realized, oh, it's actually a billion people that are in the same boat as me. And now we must have a solution, right? People, I must be able to explain what's going on. There must be something we can do. But even though a lot of people said we can do something, I tried all the drugs, all the alternative approaches, you know, from like Chinese medicine to acupuncture, nothing really helped. So I ended up having actually chronic migraine, which is, in my case, I had 20+ days of migraine a month trying to pass my degree in psychology. It was, I didn't know where to go with the pain. I was in bed like 10 days a month where you couldn't take the triptans and the painkillers, right? So it really, in the end, wasn't a life worth living. And I thought I would never be able to have a normal job. So I thought, well, I might as well dedicate my life to research. So I switched into neuroscience, was lucky enough in the US and in the UK at the time that was possible. And in the end, stumbled across something that after a lot of trial and error gave me my brain and my life back way earlier than I ever imagined. But I want to say, before we get to the potential solution, that I actually had touch points with thyroid before. So I was always, as long as I can remember, I was hypothyroid. And I tried to take these thyroid medication, you know, just as a synthetic thyroid medication they give you. And even the smallest of doses would trigger a migraine immediately. So I couldn't.
Oh, interesting.
And today I know migraine is your friend. Migraine is the warning signal. Whenever something is wrong, your migraine is telling it to you. Migraine is the fire alarm alerting you there's a fire. We try to shut off the fire alarm, but we leave the fire burning. So that's one thing that you guys want to take away. If you have migraine, it's warning you. It's your friend. It's your ally. We need to figure out what the real enemy is, or what the fire is, before we turn off the fire alarm that is so annoying, you know? So we can come back to that connection later. But the other thing that gives a connection to hormones is when my migraines were actually starting, and I realized it's getting dark over here. I'm in Switzerland. Might want to turn a bit of a light on, so people can still see me. But yeah, what I wanted to say is that the connection to hormones was my actual start of migraine. So now I know that the first episode I got was about half a year later to starting the contraceptive pill, because I had estrogen and progesterone lack. My gynecologist at the time thought it's a good idea to just give me the contraceptive pill with like 14. Half a year later, these headaches started. So again, migraines were warning me that whatever was going on and what I was newly doing was not okay.
Oh
But
my
of
gosh.
course,
Okay,
nobody
wait.
ever made the connection, you know? Yeah.
I'm going to stop you there too, because
Yes,
there's
yeah,
even a
sure.
deeper connection. So contraceptive pill, birth control pills
Yeah.
increase your risk of hypothyroidism by 243%. So
There we
here you
go.
were starting there.
Yeah,
You
yes.
you were diagnosed hypo.
And then I
Now,
got hypo. So the pill was first, then I
yeah,
got migraine, and I got hypo as well, but I wasn't tolerating the drugs for that either. So,
right.
and everything started there, right? And now these days, the pill is, and especially my age, when I was young, right? It was just handed out like candy.
Yep.
And nobody talked about any side effects at all. It was like, oh no, this is like totally safe. Just take it and maybe you'll feel better. So what the pill does actually, it increases oxidative stress, free radicals that damage everything they bump into, your DNA, your mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cells, by 50%, 50. And
Wow.
oxidative stress is part of any chronic disease. It's part of aging, right? It's just something you don't want to have elevated too high. So here
Right.
we go. I was getting that pill, which probably raised my oxidative stress higher than I could tolerate, which was triggering the migraine and the energy crisis and probably the hypothyroidism. Now, then they gave me these synthetic hormone pills, right? Which
Mhm.
actually only mimic the structure of the natural stuff. So that means it's replacing your natural thyroid, and you can tell this better than other people, right? But it's not actually the same hormone. And that's one thing that your body will tell you with migraine if it's something isn't right for you. Later now, about a decade ago, right, when I finally started going into the medical field myself, do my research, reading upon stuff, realizing maybe I cannot rely on all the doctors and I must find something myself, I realized there is bioidentical hormones, and these are not. There are hormones out there that have the same structure. I always say human identical, right? As the body would.
Yep.
I took
Yep.
those, never had a migraine from them ever, even in the right dose. So my hypothyroid is in control.
Mhm.
It's all good. Same with melatonin or other hormones. I would always advocate for the bioidentical if you have migraine, for sure, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, I did get migraine, and through my research later on, I actually realized that migraines are actually not the enemy. It's the warning signal. And whatever they're warning us about is often connected to metabolism. Now, what is metabolism? It's that broad term, right? It's
Right.
basically how you turn what you eat into energy. It's a lot of other things and steps as well, but that's a very crude form. And what I had to realize is that just because you're putting in enough calories doesn't mean that your cells get the fuel. And this sounds so simple, but it's the big,
True.
it was the biggest aha moment for me. Also, when you talk about some of your listeners are struggling with obesity, obesity is not a willpower problem. You can starve your brain, right, and still have an excess calorie at the same time. You can have 10,000 and so calories a day, but your brain is starving. So your brain will always signal, hungry, 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 I need to eat more. I need to eat more. And so, of course, you're eating more because it's a survival signal. But actually, you're eating the wrong things, or you don't have the thyroid hormones to actually turn on energy metabolism, or you don't have the micronutrients to turn the calories into energy. There's so many things that can go wrong in metabolism, in actually how you extract from what you eat the energy your cells need to survive. And if you don't have the energy you need to survive inside of your cells, inside of your brain, things will go wrong. And migraine is a very potent warning signal that there's not enough energy in the brain. and then we need to do something different. Then we need to slow down. This could be because we're having psychological stress, we're having chemical stressors, right? We have physical stress, too much exercise, we don't have enough nutrients, we only eat glucose, and we don't have these ancient ketone bodies around, which you might get into. We might not have enough thyroid hormone, we might not have enough estrogen to buffer oxidative stress, all of these things. So that's basically the theory of migraine, or my theory of migraine in a nutshell. It's your friend, and very often it's warning you of something being wrong in metabolism. So it's not a neurological disease per se, it's more like a neurometabolic disease, if you want, at least for some. And these we call metabolic migraine.
Oh, that's so good. Well, I love that you say that too, because I have said for years now that any symptom that your body is giving you is actually a gift. And just like what you're saying, it's a gift. It's a warning sign, though, because it's your body saying, hey, you're not supposed to feel this way. Dig a little bit deeper and figure out why you have these symptoms. So I love that. I love that you say that.
And it's so true. And we've lost touch to listening to our bodies, right? I mean, as a baby cries, they're hungry, they kind of intuitively know what they're craving if you give them the right options, right? And as we grow into the Western world and addiction takes over and all these different stimuli, we don't know what's good for us anymore. And that's one thing I also try to preach is forget common sense, forget what's good for everybody, what everyone says, start listening to your body, because that's your body probably knows, right? And we need to start listening again.
Well, we tend to Band-Aid everything, though. So in Western medicine just Band-Aids every single symptom. And listen, I mean, for migraine sufferers all day long, I have been there. I will take that Band-Aid to get rid of a migraine.
Absolutely.
But if we can dig deeper and find out the why, then we might not need those Band-Aids to get us out of pain.
Yeah, you absolutely. And you need to survive, you need to work, you need to function. I also take acute painkillers, and they're wonderful, right? And triptans, and you don't want to go without them when you have an acute attack. But what you cannot do, that's the problem, you can't Band-Aid every day. Your liver is not going to tolerate, in the state I was in, you cannot my liver is still damaged, right? You can't just take these strong medication day in and day out in huge quantities, right? That's not gonna get you very far or get you very healthy in the long run. So ideally, we want to raise the threshold. Your migraine is warning you, but we want to achieve that it doesn't have to warn you unless you're really doing everything wrong. So I can still get a migraine if I don't sleep and I drink and I'm jet lagged and I work too hard. Fair enough. And then I haven't listened, and it's like, okay, got you. I need to slow down a bit, So yes, I absolutely agreed.
So let's go over the real root causes of migraine as much as we possibly can. You already said lack of fuel to the brain. Can you expand on that? Like, what exact fuel do we need? Because it's not just calories. I'm assuming that if somebody ate a bunch of calories of garbage, that's not going to properly fuel their brain. So what specifically?
Yeah, and maybe we can even discuss as well going through, I developed 4 pillars that you have to basically take care of to master your migraine metabolically, which means basically fixing your metabolism. And this might lean into quite a lot of that you preach on here as well. So the first thing is you want to have your brain fueled. Your brain's metabolism or metabolic situation is actually quite unique, because it's shielded by the blood-brain barrier. So that means only 3 selected fuel sources can make it into the brain in adequate quantity, small molecules. That means the first one is lactate, happens when you exercise. Now, if you're a migraine patient, you probably won't have that around a lot. The second one, everybody probably has guessed, that's glucose. Fair enough, that works, but we have a potent backup fuel, and that's called a ketone body, which is a small fatty acid that can fuel the brain in addition to glucose. But due to the way we live today, it's hardly around. These ketone bodies are hardly around anymore. Now, there's 2 more abnormalities of the brain. Well, due to the skull that's around it, you have basically no reserves, no energy reserves in the brain. So it's completely relying on the rest of the body to always supply it with energy. And the third situation is it makes up 2% of our body's mass, but it is using up 20 to 25% of energy, whether we're awake or asleep. It's the most energy hungry organ of the body, right? So that makes the brain unique. Now, what can we do to supply that with energy, especially if you have a migraine? Well, one thing we really want to do is we want to keep our blood sugar in the blood stable so that we can always supply enough energy to the brain. And how do we do that? Well, you might have heard of a low glycemic index diet. So when you don't have foods that spike glucose as much. For example, in migraine, what we often see is something called reactive hypoglycemia. Or reactive hypoinsulinemia, which means that whenever you eat a carbohydrate-rich meal, your blood sugar goes up quite drastically. Now your body has to react and send a taxi driver that will bring the glucose into the cell, and that's called insulin. Now in migraine, what you often see is the blood sugar goes up, the body is sluggish, like, how much is coming? And then it sends the insulin, but too late, and it sends too many of those taxis. Now there's too many taxi drivers for the glucose there, so the glucose actually dips below baseline in about 1 or 2 hours, right? And now here we are, we've just eaten and now we're craving the next meal again. And it's probably we're craving something sweet and fatty because we're already too low. The body's like, this is an emergency. We're running low on glucose. Now we need something very sweet and very fatty, very fast. And here we go again, we're eating the wrong stuff. That sends our blood sugar skyrocketing again, too much insulin, we go lower. And now you have a roller coaster of glucose. Like a broken thermostat, right? It's always too low, too cold, or it's too hot. It's not good, right? So we want the blood sugar to be mainly stable. And that's by increasing fats and proteins in your diet. And also ideally not eating very sugary, very highly processed foods. Now, the other thing that very much influence glucose is actually also things that are outside of the diet, which we often don't think about. A bad night's sleep will really increase your blood glucose because cortisol goes up. A stressful relationship also, right? So there's an infection. An infection can trigger migraine. Also is cortisol. Cortisol raises glucose, even coffee sometimes if you're very sensitive, right? So there's other things to keep in mind. But the first pillar of getting enough energy to your brain, with or without migraine, but especially with migraine, keep your blood sugar stable.
Okay, I'm going to throw something in here real quick.
Please,
if somebody is not optimized with their thyroid, like let's say they know they have a thyroid problem, maybe they're on crappy T4 only or something like that, and they're just not optimized, I will often see a diabetic state or at least an insulin resistant state, definitely hypoglycemic, reactive hypoglycemic because of that roller coaster. I see that even if the person is eating well, even if they're doing a ketogenic diet, which we're going to talk about, I'll still see them in that hyperinsulinemia state because their thyroid is not optimized. So now we have a non-optimized thyroid driving migraine in and of itself, and we have it driving migraine because of the dysregulated blood sugar control. This is fascinating. I love it.
And that's and I love the comment because we actually know that in migraine, so if you have migraine, your risk of hypothyroidism is 41% or around 40% increased. And the other way around is also true. So if you have migraine, if you have hypothyroidism, your risk for migraine is increased. So it's crazy. And if you have migraine, also your risk for Hashimoto's, for example, is 2 to 4-fold increase. So there's a clear link between thyroid and migraine, which makes sense because all we're talking about is metabolism, and the thyroid hormones are the key metabolic hormones that actually make sure that we turn food into energy. Right, and that we can could release our fat stores, right? That we use the energy that we've stored and all these other things. So that's great, and actually that will come back in the supplementing pillar. I will come back to bioidentical hormones. So the second pillar now is actually micronutrients and getting enough cofactors and helpers to turn the energy we have and the macronutrients we now have in our blood into energy, and this also includes hormones. So one thing, what seldomly people know, they kind of know about, carbohydrates, fats, protein, period. But actually, there's not just these macronutrients, but there's small micronutrients. You probably all have heard of electrolytes, there's antioxidants, B vitamins, vitamin A, D, all these cofactors that our cells actually need, our mitochondria, the powerhouses, to turn food into energy. These are essential with migraine. So we know with migraine, magnesium is very often a deficiency. We know that B2 riboflavin plays a role in migraine, CoQ10 an antioxidant. And with thyroid, actually, if you have hypothyroidism, you often have deficiencies in these as well, in this exact same micronutrients. that you would have with migraine. So that's fascinating too.
It is.
And so this is very important. You need whole foods. And if you have deficiencies, you might have to supplement. Now, in this category also, you don't only need the micronutrients to actually turn the food into energy, you also need sufficient amounts of hormones. And this is where bioidentical supplementation would also come in. And this could be your estrogen, progesterone. If you are in perimenopause, for example, migraine can increase. Actually, migraine is identical in males and females before puberty. It's 50-50. After puberty, it's 3-1. So it's more a woman problem. So there's definitely a hormonal connection. And there's a phenomenon called menstrual migraine, where a lot of sufferers, menstrual migraine or not, like 70% plus get more migraine just prior to their period. Whenever estrogen and progesterone drop, because they're so protective, they're strong antioxidants, you're more vulnerable. So I think that's what makes us more vulnerable as females in general, is that men have this testosterone elevated, same at all times, and we lose that shield close to the period, right? And then there's thyroid hormones. So definitely something to check out if you have migraine is, do you have adequate amounts of thyroid hormones? Or do you have too much? That's something we can come in the third pillar. So the second pillar is micronutrients and or hormones, so helpers in metabolism. The third pillar now is antioxidants and oxidative stress. Super important. All migraine trigger factors, and I looked at them for years and years and thought they have nothing in common, but they all elevate this oxidative stress, which are these free radical bombs that destroy everything. So whether that's alcohol, weather changes, not sleeping enough, sleeping too much, exercise, skipping a meal, you know, all of these can negatively impact oxidative stress. Even your perfume, right? Noises, lights, all of that stuff has that in common, right? So now the third pillar really focuses on first reducing oxidative stress. That means eating whole foods, right? Getting rid of processed stuff, watching out with perfumes, with chemicals in your cleaning products, with chemicals in your food, your water, your air, your cosmetics. All of these can be contaminated. And these things will elevate oxidative stress, damage your powerhouses, damage your energy metabolism, and then contribute to migraine. Now, this also includes psychological stress. On a physiological level, it doesn't matter whether it's a chemical or whether it's your relationship or your childhood friend from 20 years back that is driving you nuts, or it's from perfectionisms or not saying no, right? All of these will elevate oxidative stress, as well as your exercise. If you're overdoing it, also oxidative stress. So you need to make sure that your antioxidant capacity is better. So your ability to neutralize the bombs is better than the bombs that you are creating. And this is the second part of this pillar, is really strengthening your antioxidant capacity, which could be eating sulfurous vegetables, really resting, maybe supplementing with antioxidants such as CoQ10, or melatonin is a very strong antioxidant as well that plays a role in migraine and has been shown to be protective. So that's basically the third pillar. And then the fourth and final pillar is, if none of this has worked well enough, you as a migraine patient may not actually be good enough with using and transporting glucose. So we know that in epilepsy, and migraine and epilepsy are related, that there's some issues with actually transporting glucose into the brain, or and you can interrupt in a second, but basically
no, that's good. I'm just going. I'm like, I know where she's going. I know where she's going with this. This is good.
So glucose transport deficits, you know, glucose utilization deficits. So there is an alternative energy source that's called the ketone body. And if you have problems with glucose metabolism in general, then just keeping levels stable won't help, right? Because you need an alternative. And this is where the small chain fatty acids come in. That was the big aha moment when I sat in that library in Oxford that over a decade ago. I was flicking through a Nature magazine, all this treatment for epilepsy, and all the mechanisms and puzzle pieces fell together. Ketone bodies are anti-inflammatory. They're a very efficient energy source for the brain. They reduce hyperexcitability of the brain. They improve the microbiome. They can help with mitochondrial functioning. So they can be very beneficial, and these mechanisms can be fairly relevant for migraine and other indications, of course. So you can get ketone bodies elevated by doing a strict ketogenic diet, which is a fasting mimicking diet. Your liver starts making it. Now I had have done that for a while. My liver was sluggish, so it was fairly stressful. I was struggling getting those levels up adequately, which is why eventually I turned to a compromise solution. So in this day and age, it's also possible to make these in the lab. So we made exogenous ketone bodies that we can add on top of a hopefully healthy diet. So that's the other way, the other alternative, how you can get an alternative fuel source for the brain. Quickly going to show it one. So we made this product. It's tailored for migraine with 30 plus ingredients, has the ketone bodies, has all the antioxidants, the micronutrients we discussed. No hormones because they are prescription based and very individualized, but a one-stop metabolism shop. But there's other products out there also that have ketone bodies. The only thing I want to add before I stop talking is be careful with ketone esters because they're bound to an alcohol backbone. Butane is an alcohol. So with migraine, that's something I would probably stay away from, at least chronically.
Okay.
And that's the 4 pillars.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there to unpack. I have so many questions for you. Okay. So starting at that
Looking
4th
forward to it.
pillar, here's where you
Yes.
just blew my mind. I'm sitting here going, how did I've never put this together. I never thought of this. Yes, the ketogenic diet started with basically epileptic children. And they figured out like, oh, wait, hey, when we get these kids into ketosis, their seizures stop. I know that ketosis is fantastic for the prevention and even the treatment of dementia, Alzheimer's, because we get more ketones in the brain. It's all brain. Why have I never made that connection between getting into that state of ketosis and reduction of migraines? Oh my God, you just blew my mind there. And it's so simple and it just makes sense. It just makes sense.
It's all of these conditions are partially starving brains, right? And depending on your genetics, you get an epileptic attack. Actually, epilepsy grows out into migraine sometimes. Also, why it may work with Alzheimer's is that these neurons degenerate because they have insulin resistance in the brain. They can't really metabolize this as well anymore. But I want to say it's not the end-all, fix-all solution. It can help quite a lot of patients, I believe. But of course, if you have estrogen deficiency or you have heavy metals in your brain, right, then you need to fix that, right? So if you have hormonal migraine, this may help a bit because it makes you more insulin resistant, it reduces inflammation, it reduces oxidative stress. Ketone bodies are very potent antioxidants.
Well, and I think if someone's suffering, you're going to try it. Like you're going to try anything. Why not?
Exactly. And it's risk. Well, it's the risk benefit profile is a very beneficial one, because everything that we have in the product, and if you look for the right ingredients, the human identical ones, right, then the systemic side effects are basically not there because it's in the right doses, right? Because it's ingredients that you would have in your body if the world was healthy and clean anyway, If our soils had more micronutrients, then we would be eating foods that have all of this stuff still in there.
Right.
If we wouldn't have to filter the water, then the water we would be drinking would have electrolytes in them.
Right.
So
I'm definitely down with the minerals, the electrolytes, all of that. But I love the getting into ketosis and possibly adding in the ketone bodies, not the esters.
Yes.
The actual,
exactly. The salts or the beta-hydroxybutyrate directly. Absolutely. Yes.
Yep.
And that's definitely changed my life. So I'm down to 1 day a month maximum. And I know what I've done wrong if I still get them. For example, one potent trigger is free iron. Watch out with iron, guys. Iron is a very strong pro-oxidant. It always needs to be bound to something, otherwise it can do harm. So it's one of my potent triggers still is cast iron pens or iron supplements.
Okay, so when you say bound to something, what about like a ferrous bisglycinate iron? Because I have a lot of patients and listeners who have low ferritin, which goes hand in hand with the hypothyroid symptoms. So we want to get their ferritin levels up. So what kind of iron do you like? Can you
The problem with this one is also it's going to be dissolved in free iron even already in your stomach. So I don't know what you see in your patients if they have gastrointestinal issues. A lot of people react to even iron bisglycinate because it will already dissolve. Now, the good thing, what I always recommend is take it with the least thing you have to do is take it with lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is a molecule that comes from the milk of a cow, of a calf that is born. So the mother's milk. And it's the most protective molecule ever. It helps your immune system, and it has pockets in it that can bind iron, a bit like ferritin. It's almost like our ferritin molecule, whose purpose is you want to get the ferritin up. You don't want to get the iron up, right? You want to get the ferritin up. Now, we give stuff that isn't even the ferritin because we can't, right? So at least give that because it's very protective. It can bind it and make it safe. The other thing is that I only recently discovered, which I tolerate without a migraine very well, is there is iron supplements now that have the Japanese koji mushroom cultivate the iron. So it's bound in the koji mushroom, and that makes it bound again, and you will slowly digest it and absorb it, and that has a lot less issues on the GI tract and in general side effects. So that's something you can try. It's a mushroom-based iron supplement that works wonders for me. And I take it with lactoferrin as well. And also, if you have problems with iron, oftentimes, and this is where we are misleaded, it's not that we're not ingesting enough iron. We're not absorbing the iron.
Right.
And whenever you're inflamed, and anybody with migraine or a thyroid condition has increased inflammation, your body knows iron is pro-inflammatory. Iron is pro-oxidative stress. So I'm going to take away the transporters of iron out of the gut lining so that you don't get more free iron because you're inflamed. So before you fix your inflammation, I don't want more iron coming in. Now, this is, of course, an issue because then you get more hypothyroid. You don't have the iron to do metabolism, and then it's a vicious circle, right? Of course.
Right.
But if it's an absorption problem, then again, lactoferrin can help.
Okay.
Didn't want to off topic, but still something really to experiment with and trying to reduce inflammation as well as absorption.
Yeah,
in
no,
those
that's
instances.
perfect. And I want to circle back to the estrogen topic and bioidentical hormones. So as I've shared, my assistant / friend, I mean, we've been dealing with her migraines for years now, trying to figure it out. And we've gone up and down with the progesterone, thinking, okay, is it too little? Is it too much? What's going on? And she definitely notices a correlation. Pretty much every time she puts on her estradiol patch, it will trigger a migraine. But if she doesn't use the patch, then she goes low and she has all the menopause symptoms, the hot flashes, the vaginal dryness, all of it. So where is that happy medium that you find when you're talking about estrogen?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So too little will trigger migraine, and too much will trigger migraine. We can say the same about thyroidism. Hyperthyroidism, if you have too much, it will turn on your metabolism too much. It raises cortisol, and again, it will also trigger a migraine. So this is where the issues lies, right? With migraine, you're very sensitive, and your body will tell you exactly where is your right point and what is too much and what is too little. So it's very hard to say what would be the perfect dose, right? I guess if she does still get a migraine, maybe it's still a little bit too high. Maybe also the balance between the two, right? It's not always the hormone in isolation, but it's always the ratio between them to work perfectly, right? Maybe the balance is off. So maybe you need to figure out what needs to be the exact ratio between progesterone and estrogen for her that works the best. And then are these interfering now with, for example, melatonin? Have you played around with melatonin? Melatonin is super strong. Estrogen, melatonin are always a bit in a battle, and the cortisol, the melatonin, the estrogen, all of these influence each other. So also keeping other hormones in mind. Melatonin can be super, super protective of migraine. And if she's already got a deficiency in a couple of other hormones, maybe she's not making enough melatonin, which could give a protection of the oxidative stress created if they're out of balance, potentially. But hormonal migraine is literally one of the trickiest to fix.
It's tough.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
Because that's also, it depends on how much are you producing on a given day, which is not always the same. Same with, it's always, even with hypothyroid, right? We give the same exact dose like every morning, but if you have an infection, you need 20 times maybe the amount that you're currently giving. But if you have a very good relaxed day, a perfect sleep, maybe you yourself are now making more than you did it yesterday. It's a tough one, but I would play around with the dosages and see, is she putting on a patch, right? Or a cream? Because sometimes you can have cream as well, where you can maybe experiment a little bit more nuanced with the dose.
That's true. Yeah.
So then
Yeah,
you
you
with the
could.
patch, you have the patch, or you don't have the patch, but you can have these tubs, and then you can literally do a little bit more, or 2 or 3, and you can really so I did that with my mom. You can really tailor the dose a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe you find a better dose that is right for her, because a migraine will tell her, is this the right dose or not?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's true. That's very true.
does she get them then regularly, or only when she puts it on?
Oh, regularly. Yeah. I mean, there's a correlation and then there's not, literally to the point where I told her, go look at Botox treatment, which I would love your take on that. Go look at Botox treatment because you definitely have more than, what is it, 10, 11, 15 migraines per month. And then they actually will cover the Botox for migraine treatment. So yeah, it's bad. I mean, she's
So
like
both.
you, taking so many triptans that there's a limit. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So that is so yeah, well then you definitely have to look at other things as well. Check her oxidative stress levels, check her inflammation, markers of oxidative stress in the body. See if that is too high, then there's definitely some lifestyle changes, some things you have to look at. If her baseline oxidative stress is too high, then you need to look at processed foods. Are there any chemicals? What other things can you do? Increasing melatonin, increasing antioxidants to give her more protection. Because a migraine is warning her of something. Maybe she needs ketone bodies. Maybe I'll send her a box. We can do a discount code for your followers to see what of these can help her, right? Maybe she has deficiencies in some micronutrients. That could be true as well, right? So her body is warning her. Now, it might not even be the estrogen. It might be something completely unrelated, but the estrogen is just the last drop in her bucket that makes it flow over.
Yep, exactly. I love this. I absolutely love this. So now you had mentioned melatonin. Real quick question on that. Do you like higher doses of melatonin for migraine sufferers?
I personally do, but I can't generalize it, right? I also don't want to give medical advice. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a research doctor or PhD.
Mm-hmm.
But in my case, I can tell you that I'm taking up to 30 milligrams, which is
Okay.
super high
Yep.
dose. But you will feel it with melatonin. The beauty is the moment you're getting nightmares or you feel like you're hangover in the morning, it's
Mm-hmm.
too much.
It's too
So you
much.
can literally titrate patients in. You can start with 3 milligrams, see how they feel. I have a funny story there. My mom and I were the mitochondrias, right? We have the bad mitochondria in the family. Also check that with your colleague. Check ATP levels intracellularly, see if she's deficient, and then you have the cause there right there.
Okay.
But my mom and I it was Christmas. We had family over. I was prepared. I'm taking the raw powder melatonin that you can put into water,
Okay.
not a capsule. So maybe it absorbs a bit in the mouth already. I was diluting that in water, putting it on the table for later. And halfway through the dinner, my dad's like, I'm so tired. I'm not sure what's happening. I'm so tired. I cannot stay up anymore. And he had to leave the Christmas, he had to leave the Christmas dinner and went to bed. And my mom looks at her, next to her, looks at her glass, and he accidentally drank her glass with melatonin.
And dad got a
My
really
dad
good
was
night's sleep. Really good night's sleep
my
that night.
dad has enough melatonin on his own, right? He felt like hangover and he was out of it, It was way too much for him. So it's very individual, right? If you make enough melatonin, don't worry. But melatonin we know is a sleep hormone. But what actually most of us don't know, melatonin, most of the melatonin we have is actually produced in the mitochondria, the powerhouses outside of the brain, to protect us from the oxidative stress that is produced when we make energy. So that's where I don't want to say it's most important function, right? But that's where it's essential. And especially in migraine, when you're overusing medication, when your mitochondrial, your oxidative stress is already high and you're stressed generally, right? You really need that protection overnight. And a lot of patients have this 3 a.m. migraine where they wake up in the middle of the night. They don't have enough energy to last them through the night. And they also don't have this antioxidant protection during the night. So that's where I think melatonin is something that can be or should at least be tried, and maybe start slow. Maybe 1 milligram is enough for you, and the other person might be even better with 20, right?
Yep.
Really hard to
Yep.
say.
Finding
But it's one of
finding that sweet spot. Yeah.
the only caveat that I've heard. I'm not sure how much truth is to that. If you want to conceive, Melatonin is a hormone. It does have an effect. Like all hormones are always influencing each other. Could have an effect indirectly on estrogen levels. So if you're on very high dose melatonin and you have trouble conceiving, maybe dial that back.
Oh, interesting.
That's
I
the
never thought
estrogen.
about that connection, but you're right. It is a hormone, just like vitamin D is a hormone. You have to find that balance. But I've definitely used higher doses of melatonin because I can tolerate it
What
and
have you
it
tried?
helps with
What
sleep. I've
how
gone up
much
to
have you
20 and
taken?
30. Yeah, 20
Okay,
and 30.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Some people are shocked and they're like, what? Like, because it's 10x what is typically recommended. But yeah, and then I know that in some forms of cancer, people have taken
Yep.
up to a gram.
Yep.
So
And even during COVID, melatonin was used in higher doses because it's essentially a hormonal antioxidant in one.
yeah, exactly. And super, super protective of inflammation when, for example, during COVID, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time I didn't even know that yet, but yeah, that
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. And there's things that have way worse side effects, correct? So I always try to go for the natural bioidentical options first and then choose the other things. I mean, Botox, you asked me about Botox. Botox is basically, I mean, if you're desperate, it's probably better than taking something that kills your liver every day. But it is a toxin. It's a neurotoxin. It's basically numbing the pain. It's
Okay.
inhibiting the firing of the neurons of
Right.
the trigeminal system. The trigeminal system is basically responsible for the pain in that area, right? So it's shutting those nerve signals off for a while. But it's probably a better option than overdosing on painkillers every day.
On triptans. Yeah.
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 So if
Oh my
that's
gosh. I just thought of another correlation just now. Topamax.
tell me.
Topamax is now being used for migraines, but
Yeah.
it's an anti-seizure drug.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
now we're coming back to the whole ketosis. Like, why
It
not just go
is.
into ketosis instead of using Topamax? I used Topamax for a hot minute. Oh my gosh, I felt horrible.
I did too. Oh my God. I had dementia. It was the worst.
Oh,
Imagine during your studies, you're using Topamax and you're like, I don't even know what my best friend's name is, you know? It is it's terrible.
yeah.
But what does it also do? Interestingly, it prolongs mitochondrial survival. It has a positive effect on mitochondria, which could be
Okay.
why it's also working for both.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's everything ties back to this whole topic of metabolism in one way or another.
Oh my gosh, it just does. It just does. I love that you dove into this. So, okay, you went over the four pillars. I'm assuming that this is part of your brain ritual
Yep.
program that you have. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, thank you. So basically, Brain Ritual is now what the product that arose from me diving into these four pillars and doing experiments and years of studying on myself and observing others and the literature. So basically, the four pillars that are aimed at improving metabolism, right? They can also be assisted. And I know that when I was in chronic migraine, you know, now you're supposed to do all these different things. It's hard, right? So the Brain Ritual, now it looks different. This was the old packaging still. We're making the new packaging by Brain Ritual. It still says basically helps all four pillars because the ketone bodies in there, they reduce blood glucose. So they help stabilize blood glucose. We have the micronutrients in there in bioavailable human identical form. We have antioxidants in there to help with pillar 3 and the 4, of course, again, the ketone bodies in the product. So it's basically designed to assist metabolism in migraine. We use only the dosages that have actually been studied in migraine, which for riboflavin B2, it's 400 milligrams, crazy high, 600 milligrams of magnesium. So we adhere to all the studied ingredient dosages, and it's a medical food, which I think is so beautiful. A medical food is a category that sits right between a supplement and a drug. It's generally regarded or recognized as safe ingredients. It's safe human identical ingredients, but against the disease. So it's first, do no harm, and second, let food be thy medicine are the core principles at Brain Ritual and what we do. And it was basically arising when I did my first research in the PhD. I went to Novartis and big drug companies, Roche, and I was like, look, this looks promising. Do you want to do something about this? But they obviously didn't, because anything that's preventative, that's more, that's more human identical, big pharma is not necessarily interested about. They want new small molecules and not like more natural approaches. So in the end, I did found a company, a startup, and decided to bring this to other patients like me. And we've just launched in the US last year. Now it's a struggle because now we need to do marketing and sales, which is not my forte at all. But
You develop the solution, then just let your team do the marketing.
Exactly,
Right?
exactly. And we're even now running depression trials, and we are going into Alzheimer's and aging, which is what you said, right? This is where ketones and ketosis and metabolism in general plays a role in so many neuropsychiatric issues. Many things lie in the brain, and now we realize not just the brain, but actually the brain metabolism, right? Which is
Yep.
I want to say that before we leave, because I know that for thyroid, this is also so important. For thyroid to have its effect, we are reliant on these tiny little organelles that arose millions and millions of years ago, were bacteria once. And when they were in the soup, when the earth was just water and mountains and explosions of volcanoes, there was single-cell organisms, and there was this tiny bacteria. The bacteria had problems because there was too much oxidative stress, and the single-celled organism had problems because it didn't have enough energy. And those two back then, millions and millions of years ago, were fusing together. The bacteria now making energy and the cell giving it protection. And to this day, these tiny bacteria are inside of our cells, 50,000 in some cells, making our energy. But it's actually ancient bacteria. So they're very easily damaged. But they're so vitally important. We all know about the gut microbiome, but we don't know about these other organelles, these little mitochondria powerhouses that are so vital for everything we do, but they're also so sensitive, and they're so easily damaged. And I don't know of a single civilization disease or a single, especially neurological, neuropsychiatric disease that doesn't have a problem with this little mitochondrial bacteria. So keeping them alive and thriving is one of the most important things that we do to this day and age. Keeping your thyroid healthy is one factor of this. Keeping your brain healthy, getting all the micro and macronutrients you need, working on your stress level, working on all of the 4 pillars is so important to keep your mitochondria thriving. And you're more mitochondria than you are human. So that's something you should better do and learn to love them now that you know they exist.
Yes. Oh, I love this so much. This is going to be a phenomenal episode, life-changing for so many people. Now, you had mentioned with Brain Ritual that there's a discount code. Did you want to give that to the audience? And then we'll put the links in the show notes of where they can get it.
Yes, absolutely. I think we'll just call it Dr. Amie 10, and you get your discount there. We can put it in the show notes. I would love you to try. Anybody who has a question or who has an experience, reach out. Please do ramp up the product slowly, because there's 10 grams of nutrients that your gut hasn't seen in a long time. So sometimes that can cause a bit of issues. We'll also send you one for your colleague, Amie, then you can try, have her try.
Amazing.
See if that makes any difference. Would love to hear that too. Yes. I very much appreciate being here. That was a wonderful, different conversation to what I usually talk about. So I love that.
Oh yeah, girl, I just flow. Like we just go wherever we go. And
amazing.
That's what my audience loves, is it's not structured. We're just going to talk about whatever comes up. But you hit all of the points that I had in my head and had written down that we wanted to talk about today. So perfect. Absolutely amazing interview. Thank you so much for your knowledge and your research in migraines.
Thank you, Dr. Amie, for having me, for a wonderful conversation, and for spreading the news and helping improve lives, which is what we're all about, correct?
Yes, 100%. So we will put all of Dr. Elena's contact information, social, so you can follow her, get more information, and of course that discount code in the show notes. And then I'll circle back with y'all if we can actually cure my assistant's migraines once and for all. Because if we can, if this will help her, it will help absolutely everyone. So thanks for listening.